What happens when a cocky firefighter thinks he knows better than his veteran captain in the middle of a life-threatening blaze? Captain, with all due respect, you clearly don't understand modern firefighting tactics. The words cut through the smoke-filled air like a knife. Firefighter Jake Morrison had just made the biggest mistake of his firefighting career. He had challenged Captain Mike Rodriguez's authority in front of the entire crew during a 3-alarm warehouse fire, with lives hanging in the balance. What happened next would become legendary in Phoenix Fire Department circles. Captain Rodriguez slowly turned from the command board, his weathered face visible through his helmet's visor, and said something that would end Morrison's reckless attitude forever. But what nobody in that burning warehouse knew was that Morrison had been undermining Rodriguez's authority for weeks, believing his military background and Fire Academy honors made him superior to what he called old-school captains. He was about to learn why Mike Rodriguez was called the most respected captain in the Phoenix Fire Department. If you want to see how real leadership handles arrogance and insubordination when lives are on the line, you're about to witness a masterclass in firefighting authority that will leave you speechless. The confrontation that followed would expose not just Morrison's dangerous ignorance, but reveal the depth of knowledge and experience that separates Academy graduates from true firefighting professionals. The morning of October 15th started like any other day at Phoenix Fire Station 19. Captain Mike Rodriguez arrived at 6 a.m. as he had every shift for over 2 decades. At 52 years old, he still maintained the physical strength and sharp tactical mind that had made him a legendary figure not just in Phoenix, but throughout Arizona's firefighting community. His weathered hands showed the scars of countless rescues, and his eyes held the wisdom that comes from seeing humanity at its most vulnerable moments. The station was bustling with its usual pre-shift routine, equipment checks, truck maintenance, and the camaraderie that bound these men and women together like family. Station 19 was one of Phoenix's busiest companies, covering a district that included industrial warehouses, residential neighborhoods, and the infamous chemical corridor, a stretch of manufacturing facilities that required specialized knowledge and equipment. Rodriguez had handpicked most of his crew over the years, building a team known throughout the department for their professionalism, expertise, and unwavering dedication to protecting life and property. The station housed Engine 19, a state-of-the-art pumper capable of flowing 2,000 gallons per minute, Truck 19, a 100-foot aerial platform equipped with the latest rescue tools, and Hazmat 19, a specialized unit that Rodriguez had personally designed for chemical incident response. The apparatus bay gleamed with polished chrome and perfectly maintained equipment, a reflection of the captain's attention to detail and the crew's pride in their profession. What made this day different was the tension that had been building around firefighter Jake Morrison, a 28-year-old Marine Corps veteran who had joined Station 19 6 months earlier. Morrison had graduated top of his class from the Phoenix Fire Academy, possessed an impressive military record that included 2 tours in Afghanistan, and believed his combat experience made him superior to what he called civilian firefighters who'd never seen real action. Morrison's military background was undeniably impressive. He had served as a combat engineer, handling explosives and dealing with structural damage under enemy fire. His academy instructors had praised his physical fitness, technical knowledge, and leadership potential. His written examinations had been flawless, and his practical skills demonstrations had set new records. On paper, Jake Morrison looked like the future of the Phoenix Fire Department, but paper doesn't burn buildings, and combat zones aren't chemical warehouses. What Morrison lacked was the humility to understand that military excellence didn't automatically translate to firefighting expertise. He had studied the latest tactics from the National Fire Academy, absorbed cutting-edge research from fire science journals, and memorized every protocol in the department's standard operating procedures. He was convinced that his combination of military discipline and academic knowledge made him more qualified than officers who had learned their trade through what he dismissively called trial and error. For 3 weeks, Morrison had been telling other firefighters that Captain Rodriguez was stuck in the past, using outdated tactics that put the crew at unnecessary risk. He had studied modern firefighting techniques, analyzed recent academy protocols, and convinced himself that Rodriguez's experience-based approach was actually dangerous incompetence. During off-duty conversations at O'Malley's bar, the traditional firefighter hangout, Morrison had openly questioned Rodriguez's methods, suggesting that the captain's reputation was built on outdated practices that wouldn't hold up under modern scrutiny. "The old man's living in the past," Morrison had told rookie firefighter Tommy Chen just 3 days earlier. "These veteran guys think that because they've been doing something for 20 years, they're automatically right. But science evolves, tactics improve. Rodriguez is using strategies that were cutting edge in 1995, but this is 2023. We have better equipment, better knowledge, better methods." Chen, fresh out of the academy himself, had listened with growing discomfort. Like all rookies, he was eager to learn and uncertain about challenging veteran officers. But Morrison's confidence was persuasive, his military bearing commanding respect, and his academic credentials impressive. "What do you think we should do differently?" Chen had asked. Morrison's response revealed both his knowledge and his dangerous overconfidence. Transitional attack strategies, for one. Instead of rushing into buildings with traditional interior attack methods, we should use exterior suppression first to reduce heat and improve conditions. Coordinated ventilation with thermal imaging guidance. Strategic water application based on fire behavior analysis rather than just experience and gut feeling. These weren't incorrect concepts. They were legitimate firefighting strategies taught at advanced levels. Morrison's academic understanding was sound. What he failed to grasp was the nuanced application of these tactics, the way that textbook knowledge had to be adapted to real-world conditions, and most critically, the importance of understanding specific hazards before implementing any strategy. Morrison's strategy was calculated and ambitious. Create a situation where he could demonstrate his superior knowledge, show the crew that Rodriguez was holding them back with outdated methods, and position himself for rapid promotion to lieutenant. He had even prepared several tactical arguments designed to expose what he saw as Rodriguez's outdated methods. In his apartment, Morrison had compiled a folder of research papers, academy protocols, and tactical analyses that he believed would support his position when the moment came to challenge the captain's authority. What Morrison didn't know was that Captain Rodriguez had been fighting fires since before Morrison was born. He didn't know that Rodriguez had saved over 200 lives in his career, including the legendary rescue of 3 firefighters from a collapsed apartment building in 2018 that had earned him the Medal of Valor. He didn't know that Rodriguez had pioneered several chemical fire suppression techniques that were now standard throughout the Southwest. And he certainly didn't know that beneath the captain's calm, grandfatherly demeanor lay one of the sharpest tactical minds in the region. Rodriguez's reputation extended far beyond Phoenix. He had served as an instructor at the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland, teaching advanced hazardous materials response to officers from across the country. He had written 3 chapters in the standard firefighting textbook used by academies in 12 states. His incident command decisions had been studied and analyzed by fire science researchers, and his tactical innovations had been adopted by departments from California to Florida. More importantly, Rodriguez understood something that Morrison's military background and academic excellence hadn't taught him. Firefighting was as much art as science, requiring the ability to read conditions that couldn't be measured by instruments, to make split-second decisions based on subtle environmental cues, and to adapt textbook strategies to the infinite variations of real-world emergencies. The captain had been watching Morrison for weeks, recognizing the signs of dangerous overconfidence that he'd seen in other promising young firefighters over the years. He had hoped that time and experience would temper Morrison's arrogance, that the young Marine would gradually learn to appreciate the complexity of their profession. But Rodriguez also sensed that Morrison was building toward a confrontation, and he had been quietly preparing for the moment when the rookie's overconfidence would create a dangerous situation. Rodriguez's crew consisted of 6 other firefighters, each chosen for their specific expertise and unwavering reliability. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a 15-year veteran who had worked her way up from rookie to company officer, served as Rodriguez's right hand and tactical advisor. Engineer Mike Thompson, responsible for operating the pumper and managing water supply, had served with Rodriguez for 12 years and could anticipate the captain's needs before they were voiced. Firefighter Maria Santos specialized in technical rescue and had personally extracted victims from dozens of vehicle accidents, building collapses, and confined space emergencies. Firefighter David Williams operated the aerial ladder and served as the crew's ventilation expert, capable of reading roof conditions and fire spread patterns with uncanny accuracy. Firefighter Tommy Chen, Sarah's younger brother and the newest member besides Morrison, brought enthusiasm and eagerness to learn that reminded Rodriguez of his own early days in the service. And finally, there was Morrison, talented, knowledgeable, and potentially excellent, but carrying the dangerous baggage of untempered confidence. The crew had developed a rhythm over the years, a wordless communication that allowed them to function like a single organism during emergency operations. They trusted each other completely, knew each other's strengths and limitations, and had developed the kind of professional intimacy that only came from repeatedly risking their lives together. Morrison's arrival had disrupted this harmony, not through any lack of skill, but through his inability to integrate into the team dynamic that Rodriguez had spent years building. The alarm sounded at 2:47 p.m., cutting through the afternoon routine like a thunderclap. Engine 19, Truck 19, Battalion 7, respond to structure fire, 1247 Industrial Boulevard. Multiple callers reporting heavy smoke and possible entrapment. Timeout 1447. The computerized dispatch voice was followed immediately by the urgent tones that sent adrenaline surging through every firefighter's system. The warehouse district call meant potential for a big fire with complicated logistics and dangerous conditions. As the crew suited up with practiced efficiency, Morrison felt his pulse quicken with anticipation. This could be the opportunity he'd been waiting for. A significant incident where he could demonstrate his tactical knowledge and expose Rodriguez's outdated methods. Rodriguez moved through his pre-response routine with the calm efficiency of someone who had answered thousands of similar calls. He reviewed the building occupancy information on his mobile data terminal, noting the presence of chemical storage and the complex layout of the warehouse facility. The building's emergency response plan showed multiple hazard areas, complicated ventilation systems, and the potential for rapid fire spread through interconnected storage areas. "Listen up," Rodriguez called out as the crew finished donning their gear. "Industrial Boulevard Warehouse District, possible chemical involvement. Everyone review your hazmat protocols and remember, we don't take chances with unknown chemicals. Air monitoring is mandatory, foam capability is available, and we work as a team." Morrison adjusted his self-contained breathing apparatus and felt the familiar weight of his turnout gear settle onto his shoulders. His mind was already racing through tactical possibilities, analyzing potential attack strategies, and preparing to demonstrate his superior knowledge. "Captain," he said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had studied every modern firefighting text, "shouldn't we be requesting additional hazmat resources and implementing defensive operations until we can identify specific chemical hazards?" Rodriguez glanced at Morrison through the apparatus bay mirrors as they prepared to respond. "Morrison, let's assess conditions when we arrive. Every incident is different, and we'll adapt our tactics based on what we find." This response frustrated Morrison, who saw it as evidence of Rodriguez's shoot-from-the-hip approach. In Morrison's mind, proper incident management required predetermined protocols and systematic implementation of established procedures. Rodriguez's willingness to adapt tactics based on what we find seemed like dangerous improvisation rather than professional competence. The warehouse was already heavily involved when they arrived, with smoke pouring from multiple openings and flames visible through several windows on the east side. The structure was a typical industrial building, steel frame construction with concrete block walls, flat roof, and large open interior spaces designed for maximum storage capacity. Rodriguez quickly established command, coordinating with Battalion Chief Stevens, who was en route, and began his size-up of the incident. Engine 19 to dispatch, we have a working structure fire in a large warehouse facility, approximately 200 by 400 feet, steel frame construction, heavy smoke showing with fire visible on the east side. Establishing command at 1247 Industrial Boulevard. Request additional engine company and truck company plus hazmat response team. Rodriguez's size-up was methodical and comprehensive, the result of 2 decades of experience reading fire conditions and predicting fire behavior. He noted the wind direction and speed, the color and volume of smoke, the building's construction features, and, most importantly, the specific hazards indicated by the occupancy type and storage materials. His trained eye caught details that others might miss. The slight discoloration in the smoke that suggested chemical involvement, the pattern of heat damage that indicated potential structural compromise, and the strategic positioning of hydrants and access points that would determine their tactical options. As they approached the building, Rodriguez studied the structure with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every type of fire imaginable. The warehouse stored automotive parts and industrial chemicals, a dangerous combination that required careful tactics and specialized knowledge. The building's emergency response plan, which Rodriguez had reviewed during the response, indicated storage of magnesium automotive components, lithium batteries, various petroleum products, and industrial solvents. Each of these materials presented unique suppression challenges and specific hazards that had to be considered in developing their attack strategy. We're going to enter through the main door, stay low, and work our way systematically through the warehouse, Rodriguez announced to his crew as they gathered for tactical assignments. Watch for chemical storage areas marked in red on the building plans. Thompson, establish water supply from the hydrant on Industrial Boulevard. Williams, get that ladder to the roof for ventilation, once we've identified the safest ventilation points. Santos, you're with me and Morrison on initial attack. Morrison adjusted his SCBA mask and felt the moment arriving that he'd been preparing for. This was his opportunity to demonstrate superior tactical knowledge and show the crew that Rodriguez's experience-based methods were inadequate for modern firefighting challenges. Captain, with all due respect, you clearly don't understand modern firefighting tactics. We should be using transitional attack methods, hitting the fire from outside first to reduce heat and improve visibility before entry. The radio chatter stopped. Even through their masks and the noise of the fire, every firefighter heard Morrison's challenge. Santos looked shocked. Thompson's eyes widened behind his mask, and Chen took a step backward. In 20 years of working with Rodriguez, none of them had ever heard a firefighter directly challenge the captain's tactical authority during an active incident. Rodriguez turned slowly, his voice steady, but with an edge that cut through the chaos of the scene. Firefighter Morrison, are you questioning my tactical decision? Morrison, emboldened by what he mistook for uncertainty and convinced that this was his moment to expose Rodriguez's inadequacies, doubled down on his challenge. Captain, I'm simply stating that aggressive interior attack without transitional suppression is outdated and dangerous. My military training and modern academy techniques show that your approach puts us at unnecessary risk. The crew stood in stunned silence. Morrison had just accused their respected captain of using dangerous tactics, implying that Rodriguez's methods were not only wrong but potentially fatal. In the firefighting culture, where trust and respect for command authority could mean the difference between life and death, Morrison's words were tantamount to professional heresy. Rodriguez nodded slowly, his voice remaining calm despite the urgency of the situation and the shock of Morrison's insubordination. I see. Morrison, before we proceed with your modern tactics, I'd like to ask you a few questions about this structure. You mentioned transitional attack. Have you reviewed the building's construction materials and storage inventory? Morrison felt confident in his response, certain that his academic knowledge would vindicate his position. Captain, as I mentioned, modern tactics prioritize fire suppression efficiency over building-specific considerations. The National Fire Academy protocols clearly establish transitional attack as the preferred method for reducing firefighter risk and improving operational effectiveness. That's not what I asked, Morrison. Have you reviewed the building's construction materials and storage inventory? Morrison hesitated, suddenly realizing that Rodriguez was asking about specific building details rather than general tactical principles. He had been so focused on his prepared arguments about modern firefighting theory that he hadn't studied the particular characteristics of this warehouse. Captain, I believe modern protocols take precedence over building-specific considerations. The science of fire suppression has evolved beyond the need for case-by-case tactical adaptation. Morrison, Rodriguez interrupted, his voice still controlled but with an authority that made everyone lean in despite the fire raging around them. You're in my incident command, fighting a fire in a chemical storage warehouse with Class B and Class D materials. Let me ask you again. Have you reviewed what's stored in this building? The arrogance began to fade from Morrison's voice as he realized that Rodriguez was testing his knowledge of specific hazards rather than general firefighting principles. No, Captain, but I assumed that standard suppression tactics would be effective regardless of— You assumed incorrectly. Rodriguez opened his tactical clipboard, pulling out the building's emergency response plan that he had studied during their response to the scene. This warehouse stores magnesium automotive parts and lithium batteries, Class D metals that react violently with water. Your transitional attack would create a chemical explosion that would kill everyone in a 3-block radius. The words hit Morrison like a physical blow. In his focus on demonstrating superior tactical knowledge, he had failed to consider the most basic principle of hazardous materials response, identifying the specific chemicals involved before selecting suppression methods. His modern tactics would have created a catastrophic chemical reaction that could level several city blocks. Rodriguez looked directly at Morrison through his mask, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Now, Morrison, did you review the wind patterns and building ventilation systems before suggesting exterior suppression? Morrison's confidence was crumbling as he realized the depth of his ignorance. Captain, I don't see how wind patterns relate to basic suppression tactics. Answer the question, Morrison. No, Captain. Rodriguez pointed to his weather gauge and thermal imaging camera. Wind is coming from the southwest at 15 mph, which would push our water stream directly into the chemical storage area. Your modern tactics would create a catastrophic chain reaction that would contaminate the groundwater for 50 miles downstream. The crew was silent except for the sound of Morrison's heavy breathing through his SCBA. His confident tactical knowledge had been systematically dismantled by a captain who understood not just firefighting theory, but the deadly reality of chemical fires and the specific hazards present at this particular incident. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. What he said next would not only destroy Morrison's arrogance, but teach everyone listening a lesson about experience, respect, and why tactical knowledge without wisdom could be fatal. Furthermore, Morrison, Rodriguez continued, his voice gaining strength despite the smoke and chaos around them. You mentioned that my tactical experience wasn't relevant to modern firefighting. I'm curious about your preparation for this type of incident. Did you research chemical fire suppression protocols when you saw the warehouse district address? Morrison looked confused through his mask, beginning to understand that his challenge had exposed not Rodriguez's ignorance, but his own dangerous lack of preparation. Captain, I don't see the relevance. Standard suppression techniques should be applicable to any structural fire scenario. The relevance, Morrison, is competence. We're not fighting a house fire or a car fire. We're dealing with a chemical warehouse that requires specialized foam suppression, specific entry techniques, and coordinated hazmat response. Rodriguez checked his thermal imaging camera, which was showing heat patterns that confirmed his assessment of the building's contents and fire behavior. Did you notice the color of the smoke when we arrived? Morrison's face behind his mask showed growing concern as he realized that Rodriguez was systematically exposing his failure to perform basic size-up procedures. Captain, I saw heavy smoke, but I was focused on developing tactical priorities rather than— The smoke is orange-brown, Morrison. That indicates burning lithium, which releases hydrogen fluoride gas that can kill you even through your SCBA if we breach the wrong wall. Your aggressive interior attack would have put us directly into a toxic cloud that would have required evacuation of a half-mile radius. The silence was deafening, except for the roar of flames and the distant sound of additional units arriving. Morrison hadn't noticed the smoke color because he'd been focused on proving his tactical superiority rather than reading the fire and identifying the specific hazards present. I'll take that as a no, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying disappointment rather than anger. So let me understand this, Morrison. You came onto my fireground, questioned my tactics, claimed I don't understand modern firefighting, but you failed to research the building we're attacking, didn't notice the chemical hazard indicators, and ignored basic threat assessment that any first-year firefighter should know. Morrison tried to speak, but Rodriguez held up his gloved hand. I'm not finished, Morrison. You also mentioned that my experience was outdated. I've been fighting fires for 24 years. I've handled over 3,000 structure fires. I've responded to 47 chemical incidents. I've taught hazardous materials response at the National Fire Academy for 8 years. I wrote the department's chemical incident protocols that are now used by fire departments across Arizona. Rodriguez's voice remained steady, but each word hit like a hammer blow. I've pulled 23 people from burning buildings. I've performed CPR on 67 victims. I've been burned, cut, crushed, and nearly killed more times than I can count. Tell me, Morrison, exactly what expertise did you bring to my fireground today? The scene was surreal, a life-and-death tactical discussion happening in full gear while flames raged behind them and the clock ticked toward potential disaster. Morrison's military confidence had evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization that he had challenged a master tactician while displaying dangerous ignorance about the specific incident they were facing. Now, Rodriguez continued, gesturing toward the burning warehouse where other crews were arriving and establishing perimeter operations. You suggested that my academy training wasn't adequate for modern firefighting. Let me share something with you, Morrison. I've been teaching at the Phoenix Fire Academy since before you enlisted in the Marines. I've trained over 500 firefighters. I've written tactical protocols that have been adopted by departments in 6 states. I serve on the International Association of Fire Chiefs' Research Committee for Chemical Incident Response. He adjusted his radio to coordinate with the arriving hazmat team. But more importantly, Morrison, in all those years, in all those fires, I've learned something that apparently they don't teach in military basic training. The first rule of firefighting is reading the fire before you attack it. The second rule is understanding the specific hazards you're facing. The third rule is never challenging your captain when you haven't done your homework. Morrison stood frozen in his gear, his earlier confidence completely shattered. The warehouse fire continued to rage, with additional companies arriving and establishing operations under Rodriguez's incident command. The real heat, however, was in the lesson Rodriguez was delivering about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, between confidence and competence. What happened next would become legendary in Phoenix Fire Department circles and change how rookie firefighters approached veteran officers forever. Morrison, Rodriguez said, adjusting his radio to coordinate with Battalion Chief Stevens, who had arrived and was assuming overall incident command. I'm going to do something now that might surprise you. Despite your dangerous tactical suggestions and insubordinate conduct, I'm going to give you an opportunity to properly serve this community." Morrison looked up hopefully through his visor, expecting perhaps to be dismissed from the scene or relegated to support functions. "You're going to follow my orders exactly. You're going to observe how we handle chemical fires. You're going to learn why experience matters more than academy scores. You're going to see how specific knowledge trumps general principles." Rodriguez's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath. "And you're going to understand that questioning tactics during an active incident puts everyone's life at risk." "Yes, Captain. Thank you, Captain." "I'm not finished, Morrison. After this incident, you're going to write a detailed report on chemical fire suppression. You're going to study every hazardous material in our district. You're going to spend off-duty time with our hazmat specialists learning what you should have known before opening your mouth today." Rodriguez looked directly at Morrison through their masks. "Furthermore, Morrison, you're going to write a formal apology to this crew for your conduct, not because your words hurt my feelings, but because undermining command authority during emergency operations can get people killed." Morrison nodded quickly. "Yes, Captain. Understood, Captain. If you ever again question my tactical decisions during an active incident, if you show disrespect for incident command, or if you demonstrate the same dangerous arrogance you've shown today, I will not only remove you from my crew, I will recommend your termination from the department." The threat carried the weight of absolute authority. Emergency scenes require absolute trust and immediate compliance. There's no room for ego or second-guessing when lives are on the line. Do I make myself clear, Morrison? Perfectly clear, Captain. Rodriguez looked at the rest of his crew, who had witnessed this entire exchange while maintaining their readiness to attack the fire. Let this be a lesson to everyone here, he said, his voice carrying the authority of 2 decades of life-saving experience. Firefighting is not about ego. It's not about showing off your academy training or military experience. Firefighting is about teamwork, preparation, and protecting each other. He looked back at Morrison, who stood with his head bowed in his helmet. In this department, I don't care if you were a Marine or a Navy SEAL. I don't care if you graduated summa cum laude from the academy. I care about reading the fire correctly. I care about following orders. I care about keeping my crew alive and bringing everyone home safely. Rodriguez keyed his radio. Battalion 7, Engine 19, requesting foam unit for chemical fire suppression. We have Class D metals and lithium storage confirmed. Recommend evacuation of adjacent buildings and establishment of hot zone perimeter at 200 feet. He looked at his crew. Now let's go save some lives and do it safely. But the story didn't end there. What happened during the actual firefight would prove why Rodriguez's experience-based leadership had made him legendary throughout the Southwest. As the specialized foam unit arrived and began setting up for chemical suppression operations, Rodriguez methodically guided his crew through the safest entry point he'd identified based on his size up and knowledge of the building's layout. Morrison, you're going to see why we don't rush into chemical fires. Santos, stay on my right. Williams, monitor structural conditions on the ceiling supports. They approached through a service door on the north side, away from the main chemical storage area, but providing access to the section where potential victims might be trapped. Rodriguez's thermal imaging showed the fire's progression exactly as he'd predicted, contained to the east section but threatening to spread to the magnesium storage within minutes, if not controlled. Morrison! Rodriguez called through his radio as they advanced with the foam line. You see how we're approaching from upwind, using the building's natural ventilation to our advantage? This is what 24 years of experience teaches you. Reading the building and the fire behavior, not just following textbook tactics. As they advanced with the specialized foam line, Morrison witnessed Rodriguez's tactical genius firsthand. Every move was calculated, every decision based on years of similar incidents and deep understanding of fire behavior in chemical environments. The captain directed foam application with surgical precision, preventing the chemical reaction that Morrison's aggressive tactics would have triggered. Morrison watched the color change in the smoke, Rodriguez instructed as they suppressed the lithium storage area with specialized Class D foam. When it goes from orange to gray, we know the chemical reaction is contained. When you see white smoke, that means we're controlling the hydrogen fluoride release. That's not in any textbook. That's something you learn after fighting 100 chemical fires. The suppression operation took nearly an hour, with Rodriguez coordinating multiple specialized units and managing complex tactical priorities. Throughout the operation, he continued to teach Morrison and the crew, explaining each decision and showing how experience informed tactical choices that couldn't be learned from textbooks. "See how we're using the building's natural ventilation patterns?" Rodriguez pointed out as Williams coordinated roof ventilation from the aerial ladder. The building was designed with specific airflow patterns for chemical storage. Understanding those patterns lets us control smoke movement and prevent backdraft conditions. 25 minutes into the operation, they encountered the situation that would truly test Rodriguez's expertise and vindicate his cautious approach. As they advanced toward the main storage area, Rodriguez's thermal imaging detected heat patterns that indicated potential structural failure in the roof area where the fire had been burning longest. "Hold position," Rodriguez commanded. "Williams, give me a structural assessment from the aerial. Santos, check wall stability on the south side. Morrison, watch how we evaluate structural integrity before committing to interior operations." Within minutes, Williams reported signs of roof sagging and potential collapse in the area where Morrison's aggressive interior attack would have positioned the crew. Rodriguez immediately adjusted tactics, establishing a defensive perimeter and using master streams to control the fire from safe positions. "Morrison," Rodriguez called out as they watched the roof section collapse, exactly where his conservative approach had prevented them from operating. "That's why we take time to read conditions instead of rushing in with predetermined tactics. Your textbook approach would have put us directly under that collapse." 30 minutes later, they had the fire under control with no explosions, no toxic gas release, and no injuries. Rodriguez's methodical approach had turned a potentially catastrophic incident into a textbook example of proper chemical fire suppression. As they emerged from the warehouse, Morrison pulled off his helmet and mask, the weight of his earlier arrogance hitting him like a physical blow. His turnout gear was soaked with sweat, and his hands were shaking as the adrenaline began to fade. "Captain Rodriguez," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the sound of cleanup operations. "I owe you an apology. I could have gotten us all killed." Rodriguez removed his own helmet, his gray hair matted with sweat and his face showing the exhaustion that came from managing a complex incident while teaching crucial lessons to a dangerously overconfident firefighter. "Morrison, that's exactly right. In a house fire, your aggressive tactics might work. In a chemical warehouse, they would have created a disaster that would make national news for all the wrong reasons." "How did you know all that? The chemical reactions, the smoke colors, the wind patterns, the structural indicators?" Rodriguez smiled for the first time that day, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Because I do my homework, Morrison. I study every building in our district. I know what's stored where. I understand how different materials burn and how they interact with suppression agents. You thought you could rely on General Academy protocols, but real firefighting requires adapting to specific situations." As they loaded equipment back onto the truck, other crew members approached Morrison with a mixture of concern and education. Engineer Thompson clapped him on the shoulder. "Morrison, Captain Rodriguez is the most knowledgeable and experienced officer in the department. If you'd pushed those tactics and we'd had a chemical explosion, we'd all be dead right now, along with everyone in a 3-block radius." Morrison looked at him with genuine bewilderment. "How did he stay so calm while correcting me? I basically accused him of incompetence in front of everyone during an emergency." Santos smiled. Because he's dealt with overconfident rookies for 24 years. Captain Rodriguez doesn't get angry, he educates. He knew that embarrassing you wouldn't make you a better firefighter, but showing you why experience matters would save your life and hours. As Morrison cleaned his gear back at the station, news crews arrived wanting to interview the crew about the successful chemical fire suppression. Captain Rodriguez declined interviews, as always, but the incident report he filed would be used as a training example at fire academies across the Southwest. The detailed tactical analysis he provided would become required reading for hazmat response courses. The real impact was felt immediately in Phoenix Fire Department culture. Within days, rookie firefighters were spending extra time studying building occupancies and chemical hazards in their districts. Academy instructors began emphasizing the importance of building-specific knowledge, not just general tactics. Young firefighters who had heard about Morrison's public correction made sure they showed proper respect for veteran officers' experience and knowledge. 2 weeks later, Morrison approached Captain Rodriguez in the station kitchen during the quiet hours of a night shift. He looked different, humbler, more focused, properly respectful. The cocky swagger had been replaced by genuine eagerness to learn. He had spent 60 hours studying chemical fire suppression protocols. He had visited every warehouse and industrial facility in their district to understand potential hazards. He had written and rewritten his apology to the crew 5 times. "Captain Rodriguez," Morrison began, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. "I want to formally apologize for my conduct during the warehouse fire. I was arrogant, unprepared, and dangerous. I realize now that my academy training and military experience gave me knowledge, but not wisdom. You could have written me up or kicked me off the crew, but instead you taught me a lesson that probably saved my career and my life." Rodriguez looked up from the incident report he was reviewing, studying Morrison's face for signs of genuine understanding rather than superficial compliance. "Morrison, what you learned that day wasn't just about chemical fires. You learned about leadership, preparation, and the difference between confidence and competence." "Captain, I've been thinking about what you said, about doing homework. I've studied every building in our district now. I understand why you made every tactical decision you made that day. It wasn't just experience, it was preparation meeting opportunity." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right, Morrison. Experience without preparation is just old age. Preparation without experience is just textbook knowledge. But when you combine both, you get tactical wisdom that can save lives." Morrison straightened up in his chair. "Captain, I want to earn back your trust and the crew's respect. What can I do?" "You've already started, Morrison. Keep studying, keep learning, and remember that the moment you think you know everything is the moment you become dangerous to your crew." Rodriguez set down his paperwork and looked directly at Morrison. "But I want you to understand something else. My correction of you that day wasn't about protecting my ego or asserting authority. It was about preventing you from getting people killed through dangerous overconfidence." Over the following months, Morrison transformed into one of the most dedicated and knowledgeable firefighters in the station. He became known for his meticulous preparation, his deep respect for veteran experience, and his willingness to ask questions rather than assume knowledge. He spent his off-duty time studying with the department's hazmat specialists, learning from paramedics about medical emergencies, and working with technical rescue teams to understand specialized equipment and procedures. The transformation was noticed throughout the department. Other captains began requesting Morrison for special assignments, knowing that his combination of military discipline and hard-learned humility made him exceptionally reliable. His academy classmates noticed the change, seeing how Morrison had evolved from an arrogant know-it-all into a serious professional who understood the difference between knowing facts and possessing wisdom. 6 months after the warehouse incident, Morrison was involved in another chemical emergency, this time as the senior firefighter responsible for guiding a new rookie through his first hazmat response. As they approached a overturned tanker truck leaking unknown chemicals, Morrison found himself in Rodriguez's position, teaching rather than learning. "Remember," Morrison told the rookie as they donned chemical suits, "we identify the chemical first, establish a hot zone, and approach from upwind. Never assume that standard tactics will work with unknown materials." The rookie nodded eagerly, and Morrison realized he was passing on the same wisdom that Rodriguez had taught him through painful but necessary correction. Years later, when Morrison was promoted to lieutenant and eventually captain, he would tell rookie firefighters, "Captain Rodriguez didn't destroy my confidence to humiliate me. He destroyed my arrogance to save my life and the lives of my crew. He taught me that firefighting isn't about being the bravest person on the scene. It's about being the most prepared, most knowledgeable, and most dedicated to bringing everyone home safely." The warehouse incident became one of the most discussed training scenarios in Phoenix Fire Department history. The incident report was distributed to fire academies across the country as an example of proper incident command under complex, hazardous conditions. Fire science researchers studied Rodriguez's tactical decisions, and several of his innovations during the chemical suppression operation were incorporated into national protocols. But for those who knew Captain Rodriguez, it was simply another example of what made him exceptional: the ability to discipline with dignity, to teach through action, and to transform dangerous overconfidence into life-saving wisdom. His handling of Morrison's challenge had been watched by the entire crew, and each of them learned valuable lessons about leadership, respect, and the importance of continuous learning. Lieutenant Sarah Chen later said that watching Rodriguez handle Morrison was like attending a masterclass in leadership. The captain could have destroyed Morrison's career with a single report to the chief. Instead, he turned a dangerous situation into a teaching moment that made all of us better firefighters. Engineer Thompson noted how Rodriguez's calm response had actually strengthened the crew's cohesion rather than dividing it. "We all saw how the captain handled disrespect and dangerous arrogance. It made us respect him even more, and it showed Morrison that real leadership doesn't need to shout or threaten. It just needs to be right." The incident also had broader implications for the Phoenix Fire Department's training programs. Chief Martinez, who had reviewed Rodriguez's detailed incident report, implemented new protocols requiring all firefighters to complete specialized training in building-specific hazard assessment. Rodriguez was asked to develop and teach a course called Tactical Adaptation in Chemical Environments, which became mandatory for all company officers. 3 months after the warehouse fire, Morrison received an unexpected assignment. Chief Martinez had personally requested that Morrison be transferred to the department's training division for a 6-month rotation, working directly with academy instructors to develop new curricula based on his experience with Rodriguez. "Morrison," Chief Martinez explained during their meeting, "Captain Rodriguez's report on your incident was remarkable, not because of your initial mistakes, but because of your transformation afterward. We want you to help us teach other recruits about the difference between textbook knowledge and practical wisdom." Morrison's work in the training division proved to be transformative for the entire department. He helped develop scenario-based exercises that required recruits to adapt general tactics to specific hazards, emphasizing the importance of building-specific research and careful incident assessment. His military background, combined with his hard-learned lesson in humility, made him uniquely qualified to reach overconfident recruits who might otherwise dismiss veteran officers' experience. During one memorable training session, Morrison found himself facing a recruit remarkably similar to his former self, a college graduate with an engineering degree who believed his academic background made him superior to traditional firefighters. Morrison smiled as he recognized the familiar arrogance and began the same type of systematic questioning that Rodriguez had used on him. "Tell me about the building we're about to enter," Morrison said during the simulated warehouse fire exercise. "It's a standard commercial structure, Lieutenant. Basic interior attack should be effective," the recruit responded with confident certainty. "Really? Did you notice the placards on the loading dock?" The color-coded storage areas? The specialized ventilation systems? As Morrison systematically exposed the recruit's lack of preparation, he felt a deep appreciation for Rodriguez's teaching methods. The captain had shown him that the most effective way to combat dangerous overconfidence wasn't through anger or humiliation, but through patient, methodical demonstration of superior knowledge and preparation. The recruit's arrogance crumbled, just as Morrison's had, and Morrison found himself using Rodriguez's exact words. The first rule of firefighting is reading the fire before you attack it. The second rule is understanding the specific hazards you're facing. The third rule is never assuming you know everything. Word of Morrison's effective teaching methods reached Rodriguez, who visited the training academy to observe one of Morrison's classes. Watching his former subordinate teach the same lessons he had learned through painful experience, Rodriguez felt the deep satisfaction that comes from seeing knowledge passed successfully to the next generation. After the class, Rodriguez approached Morrison with a rare smile. "You've learned well, Lieutenant, but more importantly, you're teaching well. That recruit will never forget the lesson you taught him today." Morrison straightened with pride. "I learned from the best, Captain. Everything I know about real leadership came from watching you handle my arrogance with patience and wisdom." Their conversation was interrupted by the Academy Commandant, who had been observing the training session. "Lieutenant Morrison, Captain Rodriguez, I've been watching your collaborative teaching approach. Would you consider developing an advanced course for veteran officers on managing overconfident subordinates?" Rodriguez and Morrison exchanged glances, understanding immediately that their warehouse incident had evolved into something much larger, a systematic approach to developing both tactical competence and leadership wisdom. The advanced course they developed, titled Leadership Under Fire, Managing Ego and Building Competence, became one of the most requested training programs in the Southwest. Fire departments from California to Texas sent their officers to Phoenix to learn Rodriguez's methods for transforming dangerous overconfidence into professional excellence. During one particularly memorable session, a fire chief from Colorado asked Rodriguez directly, "Captain, how do you stay so calm when someone challenges your authority so disrespectfully?" Rodriguez's response became legendary among fire service leaders. "I've learned that anger is the enemy of education. When someone challenges me out of ignorance or arrogance, getting angry only makes them defensive. But staying calm and systematically demonstrating superior knowledge, that creates learning. My job isn't to protect my ego, it's to protect my crew and serve my community. Sometimes that means teaching difficult lessons to people who don't want to learn them." 5 years after the warehouse incident, Morrison achieved a goal he had once thought impossible. He was promoted to captain and assigned to his own company. His promotion ceremony was attended by Rodriguez, now approaching retirement, and the entire crew from Station 19. In his acceptance speech, Morrison acknowledged the debt he owed to Rodriguez's tough love and patient teaching. 5 years ago, I thought I knew everything about firefighting. Captain Rodriguez showed me that I knew nothing about wisdom. The difference between knowledge and wisdom is experience, and the difference between experience and expertise is humility." Rodriguez, sitting in the audience, felt a deep sense of professional satisfaction. He had taken a dangerously overconfident young firefighter and transformed him into a leader who would now pass the same lessons on to the next generation. But perhaps the most meaningful validation of Rodriguez's teaching methods came 6 months later, when Morrison faced his own version of the warehouse incident. A rookie firefighter on Morrison's crew, fresh from the academy with honors, challenged Morrison's tactical decisions during a hazardous materials incident. Morrison found himself in Rodriguez's position, dealing with a young firefighter who confused academic achievement with professional competence. Drawing on everything he had learned from Rodriguez, Morrison handled the situation with the same calm authority and systematic education that had transformed his own career. After successfully managing both the incident and the learning opportunity it provided, Morrison called Rodriguez to thank him once again. "Captain, I finally understand what you were doing that day at the warehouse. You weren't just correcting my tactics. You were teaching me how to be a leader." Rodriguez's voice carried the warmth of a mentor who had watched his student become a teacher. "Morrison, the most important thing I taught you wasn't about firefighting tactics. It was about turning moments of failure into opportunities for growth. That's what real leadership does. It creates more leaders." The warehouse incident and its aftermath became a case study taught at the National Fire Academy, where Rodriguez eventually served as a senior instructor after his retirement from Phoenix. Students from across the country learned about the incident through role-playing exercises that replicated the challenge Morrison had presented and Rodriguez's masterful response. In academic papers analyzing effective leadership in high-stress environments, the Rodriguez-Morrison incident was cited as an example of how experienced leaders could transform potentially destructive confrontations into powerful learning experiences. Management experts from outside the fire service studied Rodriguez's methods, recognizing their applicability to any profession where safety depended on respect for authority and proper training. The incident also highlighted the broader challenges facing the modern fire service, where rapid technological advancement and evolving tactical knowledge had to be balanced with respect for experience and proven methods. Rodriguez's approach showed that the solution wasn't to dismiss either innovation or tradition, but to integrate them through careful evaluation and continuous learning. Morrison's transformation became a template for developing other promising but overconfident firefighters. The Phoenix Fire Department implemented a formal mentoring program that paired experienced officers with high-potential recruits who showed signs of dangerous arrogance. The program's success rate was remarkable, with over 90% of participants showing significant improvement in both tactical competence and professional attitude. As Rodriguez prepared for retirement after 28 years of service, he reflected on the hundreds of firefighters he had trained and the thousands of lives he had saved. But the Morrison incident stood out as one of his most important professional accomplishments, not because of the tactical success in suppressing the chemical fire, but because of the transformation he had achieved in a young firefighter's approach to the profession. During Rodriguez's retirement ceremony, Morrison, now a seasoned captain with his own reputation for excellent leadership, served as the keynote speaker. His words captured the essence of what made Rodriguez's leadership so exceptional. "Captain Rodriguez taught me that true authority doesn't come from rank or position. It comes from knowledge, preparation, and an unwavering commitment to doing what's right. He showed me that the mark of a great leader isn't how they handle success, but how they transform moments of conflict into opportunities for growth." Morrison paused, looking directly at Rodriguez in the audience. "Captain, you could have ended my career that day at the warehouse. Instead, you saved it. You taught me that firefighting isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most prepared, the most humble, and the most dedicated to bringing everyone home safely." The audience of firefighters, many of whom had similar stories about Rodriguez's patient teaching and firm guidance, erupted in applause. Rodriguez, visibly moved by Morrison's words, stood and nodded his acknowledgement of what had become a professional relationship that exemplified the best traditions of the fire service. In his own retirement speech, Rodriguez reflected on the lessons that the Morrison incident had taught him about leadership and teaching. "I learned that day that the most dangerous firefighter isn't the one who lacks knowledge. It's the one who has knowledge but lacks wisdom. My job as a captain wasn't just to fight fires. It was to develop firefighters who could think critically, act wisely, and lead others." He looked out at the assembled firefighters, many of whom he had trained and mentored over the years. "The warehouse incident with Morrison taught me that every challenge to authority is an opportunity to teach. Every moment of conflict is a chance to build understanding. Every failure is a stepping stone to excellence." Rodriguez's final words as an active firefighter captured the essence of what had made his leadership so transformative. We protect lives not just by running into burning buildings, but by training the next generation to run into them safely, wisely, and with the humility to keep learning until the day they retire. The warehouse incident became more than just a training story. It became a foundational example of how the fire service could maintain its proud traditions while adapting to new challenges and technologies. Rodriguez's methods showed that respect for experience and openness to innovation weren't contradictory forces, but complementary elements of professional excellence. Years later, as Morrison trained his own generation of firefighters, he would often begin difficult conversations with overconfident recruits by saying, "Let me tell you about a warehouse fire where I thought I knew everything, and a captain who showed me I knew nothing about wisdom." The story would unfold just as it had that day in October, with Morrison playing Rodriguez's role and teaching the same lessons about preparation, humility, and the difference between knowledge and understanding. Each telling reinforced the culture of continuous learning and mutual respect that Rodriguez had built, ensuring that his legacy would continue to shape firefighters long after his retirement. In the end, the real fire that day wasn't in the warehouse. It was the burning away of Morrison's dangerous overconfidence, replaced by the steady flame of genuine professional competence that would serve him and his future crews for decades to come. Rodriguez had shown that the most important fires firefighters extinguish aren't always the ones threatening buildings. Sometimes they're the fires of arrogance and ignorance that threaten the safety and effectiveness of the crews themselves. The lesson endures in every firehouse where Rodriguez's influence has been felt. True leadership in the fire service isn't about commanding respect through position or authority, but about earning it through knowledge, wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to the safety and development of every firefighter under your command. Captain Mike Rodriguez didn't just fight fires, he forged firefighters, turning raw potential into polished professionals through patient teaching, firm guidance, and the kind of leadership that creates leaders rather than followers. And in Phoenix, in firehouses across Arizona, and in training academies throughout the country, firefighters continue to learn from the warehouse incident, where arrogance met wisdom, where challenge met competence, and where a dangerous confrontation was transformed into a powerful lesson that continues to save lives and build careers to this day.